What's up? It's your boy DJ Slate in the building. What's up, Novelli? How you been?
I am well. How are you doing?
Doing well. Doing well. It is Tuesday, March. What is it? 24th.
24th.
Want to welcome our guests today at home, chilling, getting into their second week of COVID-19 lockdown. And also to our future guests, to our students who are watching this perhaps in the year 2021. Want to welcome you. We are right now stuck at home for the next 5 weeks at a minimum. And yeah, so we're going to talk about Adolf Hitler and Fidel Castro. Every couple days, we'll release videos. I put together a schedule yesterday, emailed you all and the parents as well, saying you can expect videos to be released on Wednesdays, which is what our plan is at this point, is to release this video tomorrow. Maybe we'll get it out today. What do you think, Novelli?
I hope so. That would be good.
My plan is on Wednesdays, however, to get together with Novelli and share out our IB history videos. A quick note before we get started. Got an email yesterday, and again, our viewers in 2021 and beyond, you're going to have to just deal with this, maybe fast forward since this does not apply to you. But yeah, we got an email yesterday talking about IB tests canceled for the year 2020. Novelli, what were your thoughts when you read that?
Pretty shocked. And I really, more than anything, I felt for our students because, you know, they've been working so hard for this. And I know the testing can be stressful, but you know, another way to look at it is that they basically get to prove how hard they've worked, and they get that affirmation that all their hard work is going to pay off. And so for that to get taken away, and, you know, that's just one of many, many things, because your senior year is pretty special. It's one of the things I remember best about my high school career. And it's kind of like your swan song of public education. So for it to get kind of robbed in this type of circumstances, I just feel bad for our students because they got to be gutted.
Yeah, and it's something that they will remember for the rest of their lives, as will we. But for them in particular, the emotional aspect of it is going to leave an indelible mark and likely transform them as people. And you know, this is, by the way, this is how ideology is formed. This is how your belief systems are formed, is through your experiences with the real world and with the things that come and go, the crises you experience. So pay attention to the solutions, to what you think is best for our society, and pay attention to the decisions that get made that impact you on a daily basis, and allow that to shape how you believe about what would be best for our nation. This is how ideology is formed. So, but yeah, I echo Novelli's sentiments. I feel terrible for our kids out there, our seniors that are missing out on the last couple months of their senior year. But here's the good news, is that you know how to work hard, and you won't have an IB exam to affirm that. But I think that you should find solace in the fact that you've developed the skills and the habits of working hard when the time comes to need to work hard. And so our plan is to continue to enrich your learning. We're going to continue today talking about Adolf Hitler. We're going to talk about his post-prison experience and how he developed what they call the Fuhrer Cult, which is him taking his personality and putting it front and center for people to follow. And so that's what we're going to do. We'll spend a couple minutes on that and then turn you loose for the rest of the week to enjoy yourselves. So keep distancing yourself out there. You heard the governor's statement yesterday to stay home. Follow those orders, especially you young folks who, you know, are hanging out with people. You need to stop that. You're hanging out with your friends might seem like it's not hurting anyone, but it doesn't take long for you to transmit whatever you get from your friends onto your parents, who then transmit it up to their parents. And so anyways, Novelli, you got something to say?
You can just Snapchat each other. I hear that's a popular application.
Yeah, that's rumor on the streets. So, like I said, the Fuhrer Cult. This trial, the trial, the beer hall trial, brought Hitler star-studded status, acclaim, critical acclaim, and he was really reflective of the process he had gone through, both in his time in prison and beyond. And he realized that, you know, as we left off with our last video, his life, he was meant to be a politician, and he knew this. And he also learned that using force was not necessarily going to be the best way to seize power. And so he believed that it was going to take a massive propaganda effort, mass mobilization, and not paramilitary pushism that would open up the path for national revolution. So he really began to set in the latter half of the 1920s, set on a course of creating as much propaganda, as much visual imagery, showing him to be the sort of the singular man who is going to lead Germany to its national salvation. And the best way to do this is by having rallies and staging rallies where you get thousands of people out there in attendance, and then you push out those images with you in front of thousands of people to the masses, and it communicates that you're kind of a big deal. So during this time of reflection, he revised certain respects to his views on how to attain power. Now, in so doing, this is what's interesting, and this is Kershaw's words here. He came to think of his own role in a different way. In the wake of the triumph of his trial, he began to see himself, as his followers had started to portray him from the end of 1922 onwards, as Germany's savior. And it's interesting that he sort of hadn't realized that about himself yet. He hadn't seen what his own followers had seen in him in the early 1920s until his time in prison. And when he wrote his book, which originally, I thought this was fun. I thought you'd love this, Novelli. His original title was 4.5 Years of Struggle Against Lies, Stupidity, and Cowardice.
That sounds. You know what that looks like is like a tweet that someone
Mm-hmm.
might write.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, book title. All right, so I've written my 700 plus page autobiography. What should I call it? You know, after all that writing, I'm going to go with 4.5 Years of Struggle Against Lies, Stupidity, and Cowardice. Just seems like very simple, but he did simplify it even further. And he ended with My Struggle, or Mein Kampf. And he landed on this title in the spring of 1925.
Yeah, it's a little less verbose.
Yeah. Pithy. What does pithy even mean?
Uh,
Simple or something?
you know what? I'm gonna Google it.
Google it. Let's go. Fact check.
Pithy means concise and forcefully expressive. That's a good word.
Ooh. So we are the opposite of pithy then.
Yes, on occasion.
We can tend to be. All right. So continuing on the development of the Fuhrer Cult, and again, all this language that you're about to see is credit to Ian Kershaw. He sold 10 million copies of this book. You imagine how rich he must have been? 16 languages. And this is where it gets interesting. As soon as he gets out of prison, he says, all right, NSDAP is my party. And there was, you know, what was interesting is there were, you know, as we talked a couple weeks back, there were several different Volkic groups out there that were all vying for status in Germany. They were trying to get elected to the Reichstag so they could begin to have influence over the legislative body. And no singular party had emerged as the dominant party in Germany on this Volkic right. And what Hitler saw was, in his time in prison in 1924, the Volkic movement lost all of its momentum. It lost all of its allure to the population, and This was the second time that Hitler had kind of been removed from the Volkic movement. He had gotten in trouble in 1922 as well. I can't remember for what. You know what's crazy though, Novelli? I was reading the same judge who ruled on his issues in 1922 ruled. It was the same judge in his beer hall push. Isn't that crazy? The same
Really?
judge. Yeah. I don't know how this worked, but anyways, both times he was in trouble, the Volkic movement lost its steam. And so Hitler was able to say, you guys need me. You need me. And that's the truth. The numbers don't lie. And so he came out, he said, we're going to redo some things. If you want to be a member of the NSDAP, you got to leave the party and re-enroll. And when you re-enroll, you're going to call me the leader. You're going to pledge your loyalty to me, Adolf Hitler, and I will be the voice of the party and the ideology. And he refused to accept any external conditions that would limit his leadership. I know that Germany tried to ban him from speaking. They tried to ban the political party, and he just simply didn't allow it. So he called for the former members to join. He said, like, when you join, I'm not going to ask you anything about your past. I don't care about that. All I care about is your loyalty to me. And so this is where it really begins, because eventually Germany, under the leadership of Hitler, when you think about when he becomes the chancellor and he is the leader of this NSDAP, the people have already pledged their loyalty and their allegiance to him and not to the nation of Germany. And so he's going to become the nation of Germany as a result of all of these steps he's taken in the 1920s, where instead of pledging your loyalty to the party platform and the party ideology, you're pledging your loyalty to him, the all-knowing, omniscient, if you will, Adolf Hitler. You see here, as I just mentioned, that if you wanted to rejoin the NSDAP, you had to basically re-enlist and pledge your allegiance. And then once you were in, Hitler was really frank, pithy, if you will, about the need to focus all energy on one goal, on attacking a single enemy to avoid fragmentation and disunity. He said the art of all great popular leaders consisted at all times in concentrating the attention of the masses on a single enemy. And as Kershaw explains, from this context, it was plain that the singular enemy to the German people was the Jew. So guess where he went for his first major speech after prison, Novelli?
The Munich Beer Hall.
How'd you guess that?
It's symbolic. It's got a lot of meaning to him, too.
Yeah, definitely. So he goes back. There's thousands of people. They actually, the place was packed 3 hours before the speech started. There were 3,000 people. They got there in the early morning to get a spot. They had heard that he was coming. They put up these red placards all over Munich saying Hitler's going to be speaking at this time at the same place. And the place was booked 3 hours in advance. Allegedly, there were thousands of people lining the streets awaiting his arrival. And when he took the stage late, of course, he liked to show up late. He said, "Gentlemen, let the representation of the interests of the movement from now on be my concern." You hear this, let me be the one to lead us. And he said, his leadership had, however, to be accepted unconditionally. He said, "I'm not prepared to allow conditions as long as I carry personally this responsibility. And I now carry again the complete responsibility for everything that takes place in this movement." Again, doing his best within the party to consolidate the party control into himself. People were cheering and shouting their loyalty calls to him. Everyone again stood up and sang, as had been the case in the Munich Beer Hall push, the German national anthem. So the idea and the leader at this point were inseparable. And that's what makes Hitler unique. Is I guess maybe it doesn't. This is really where authoritarianism develops, I think, is where you begin to see a fanatical loyalty to the personality, to the individual leader, and not to the underlying ideology, the party platform that was written in an unemotional time, I guess. Maybe it was emotional when it was written, but it was clear that the idea and the leader were becoming inseparable at this time. And this is going to continue to build toward 1933. Fanatical willpower converted into organized mass force was what was required. That demanded freedom of action for the leader, total obedience from the following. What emerged in the aftermath was therefore the growth of a new type of political organization. This was one that was subjected to the will of the leader, who stood over and above the party, the embodiment in his own person of the idea of National Socialism. At this point, it doesn't really matter what the party platform is. Whatever the leader says is the case, is the case. It is the truth. And so in 1926, he's going to hold another rally, at this time in Weimar, the seat of the government. 7,000 to 8,000 people showed up, including 3,600 stormtroopers, all dressed in their brown shirts. There were also 116 SS in attendance. This was the first time that the SS had made a public appearance. The SS was formed out of what we talked about in the beer hall push, the Hitler Assault Squad. That's what the SS was formed out of, and it was founded in 1925. And it was his personal bodyguards. He was already picking up that the SA was going to be a problem, and he wanted his own bodyguards to protect him against a potential future overthrowing by the SA. You got any questions?
No, this is all, it all kind of fits together. You can just kind of see where it's all kind of funneling towards.
Yep. And we have the benefit of hindsight clearly here, but now here's what's crazy is the actual party enrollment was lower, because remember, they had to reset. They basically kicked everyone out and demanded that you rejoin, and so it was smaller. The party was smaller, but it was more spread out geographically. It was widespread, and this is, while they didn't have the same numbers, they had people planted. They had a grassroots movement happening out and about in Germany. So Hitler wasn't really too concerned with the total enrollment. He was more concerned with the fact that people were able to spread propaganda far and wide in Germany. And this is where he begins to act differently in the party. He begins to distance himself, isolate himself from even some of the members of the inner circle of the NSDAP. He did this in a calculated fashion to make the rare occasions that he would be seen by those in the inner circle to be moments of awe. It was kind of like just supply and demand. The demand was very high to be in Hitler's orbit, and he did not provide much opportunity for supply to where he would allow people to be in his orbit. And this made it to when he was around, people were just in awe because they didn't get to see him very much.
And you think he consciously made this decision?
Well, Kershaw does. Yeah. Kershaw believes that this was a conscious decision. And so I'm going to go with what Kershaw says in this case. I find it fascinating and pretty smart,
Yeah, for sure.
I think, it's funny. I'm going to go to Nelly here. You ever heard of Nelly, the quote unquote rapper?
I know of Nelly.
Ja Rule is another example of this. Ja Rule, this dude, he was pretty good, man. He was really entertaining. He had a good sound to his delivery, but there was a period of time in the early 2000s where this dude was on every single song that was on the radio. And you know what happens, right? Is people are like, all right, I'm tired of this dude. And he didn't really limit the supply. I think that's where somebody like Drake has done a better job There was a while there where it seemed like Drake was all over every song that was on the radio, and he's scaled back because of the fear of oversaturation. And Hitler was doing this. He didn't want to oversaturate even in his own party exposure to him. So very interesting.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so this distance he deliberately placed between himself was calculated to emphasize the sense of awe and admiration in those that were in his presence. I know that's the same bullet point as before. It's not the same slide though, right? Yeah, good. Okay. In reality, and this is our last point here before we'll wrap things up, Hitler showed very little human interest in his followers. I love this line. His egocentrism was of monumental proportions. The propaganda image of his fatherliness concealed inner emptiness. Other individuals were of interest to him only insofar as they were useful. So if you were useful to his movement, then he would show some interest in you. But other than that, he didn't really care.
Wow.
So there you go. That's the Fuhrer Cult. You got any questions?
No, it just seems to kind of be setting the stage for how society was essentially ready for this authoritarian to lord power over them. And I think probably, if I'm understanding this lesson correctly, maybe the most important thing to take from it is not so much that people became aligned with the platform, but people became aligned with the person.
Correct.
So therefore, whatever the person did was right. It didn't matter if it conflicted with previous statements, didn't matter if it conflicted with existing law, conflicted with other people. If you're with the person, whatever they do is right. Doesn't matter what happened before or in the future, it's right.
Correct. And this is the role of the leader. One of those 5 tools there, right? This is how it works. The leader has to become, in order for an authoritarian movement to take a grip of a society, the leader has to become greater than the party. They have to become bigger than the law. The law cannot apply to an authoritarian. The authoritarian has to become the law.
Yeah.
And so what the authoritarian says must go. And when a society says, yep, go, yep, preach, I want what that guy's bringing to the table. If you could get enough people saying that, it doesn't matter what we are politically or ideologically. It doesn't matter what we are. Whatever that guy says, that's what I want. And if you can get enough people in a society to buy into that, then you are well on your way to living in an authoritarian society. So
fascinating stuff.
And when we talk about this COVID situation right now, I've had a couple conversations with former students and other adults out there who they look to China as why can't we just do what China did? And I tell them that you cannot take China and compare it to where we're at, because what China's able to do as an authoritarian society is to strongly enforce any sort of no movement concept. So they say, like we saw our governor come on yesterday and say, please stay home. China doesn't say, please stay home. Right? I mean,
yeah, it's stay home or else face the threat of the force of law.
Correct. And that means death or disappearance. Oh, you just froze. I don't know if this is my side or your side. We'll wait for you to come back. Novelli taking a quick little nap there. There he is. There he is. He's back.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was talking to my dad on the phone, and it's really interesting because I remember last year.
Your internet's out again. All right, tell us when you can hear me. I know it's soon. It's only a couple seconds. Okay. There you are. All right, you were talking to your dad.
Yeah, so I was, and this kind of started last year. I was thinking about what are some weaknesses of liberal democracies, because in school and stuff throughout our lives, we constantly talk about how great it is. But But like when we were looking at the Russian disinformation and how there's very little penalty in society for sharing things that are false because we have freedom of speech, and how those false ideas can propagate throughout society basically unimpeded without the threat of law, and sometimes those ideas can be very damaging. So that's one example of maybe a weakness of liberal democracies. Another is something that we're seeing right now. So I remember in January when this started breaking out, I remember saying to some of my students in CW, maybe in IB history too, I was like, to some degree, this is the ideal situation to have an authoritarian state, because, this is when you would want an extremely unified, very tough authoritarian crackdown on people's movements, because it's the only way to contain the disease. And, like you were saying, if you attempted to do this in the United States, it would be a disaster. It would be a disaster because Americans, by nature, at least in my estimation, if you told them you're not allowed to leave your house, and if you do, the police will be there, there's a lot of people in America who would say, all right, game on. Okay, I will leave my house. This is America. You cannot make me do that.
Yeah,
and
psychological reactance, right?
Yeah. And, part of that I think has to do with culturally, our identity as Americans is that the government doesn't have the authority to tell us to do things like that. Now, if you really want to dive into it, to some degree, you could argue that they do, because ultimately their authority comes with protecting the masses. And by being outside of your house, you actually are threatening the masses. But I'm not sure people are in the mood to have that conversation. But it's an interesting thing to think about.
Agree. Well, good stuff, man. As always, it's a pleasure having a conversation with you. I'm excited to get to Hitler's official takeover of the government. We're slowly but surely getting our way there, and then we get to get into Castro.
Yeah, so, I'm very excited for that.
Yes, as am I. So once again, just wanted to say that I hope everyone's doing well out there. We miss you. I definitely miss being with you guys, and want to bid you adieu from the IB 20th Century show. Why have we just now? Why did I just now see this?
I don't. Oh, I I never noticed that either.
The Department of Redundancy Department would like to bid you farewell.
Yes.
And have a great day out there. Deuces.
Bye, guys.